Hi, I'm Trish from TrishNewbery.com and welcome to the sew along for the Ava sweater. So depending where you come from, you might call it a pullover, a jumper, a sweater, a sweatshirt. Ideally this is designed for mid-weight knits. So because this is a knit fabric, I'm going to use mainly my overlocker, and I'm going to thread my overlocker with 4 threads of matching colour to my fabric. And my fabric today is a baby pink. Now of course you don't have to have a serger overlocker to sew this. You could sew this on your regular home sewing machine. Just read your manual and choose the most appropriate stitch. That will either be a zigzag or a lightning bolt stitch. And if you need help with that, I do have an article and a video that you can watch or read depending on what you prefer. So because this is a placket, we in addition to sewing with our serger to get our stretch stitches for our seams, I'm also going to need a straight stitch on my sewing machine just to help with that placket at some of the small places. So you're going to need also a way of finishing the hems if you're sewing the hemmed version. If you're a beginner, this is probably a little bit more advanced than a beginner, but if you're a beginner and hemming doesn't fill you with joy, just choose the waistband version and the cuff version. So the only other thing I suppose you really need to know, if you're sewing the bishop sleeve version, which is the puff at the lower wrist, the cuff has to be sewn in something that's really stretchy. So you need 100% stretch on that. So I suggest a ribbing fabric. So I'm going to sew my cuffs in the ribbing for that bishop sleeve. So the fabrics you can use for this, lots of different winter type fabrics, everything from a mid-weight merino wool right through. You could actually go as light as a double brush polyester. I'd suggest something, a sweater knit, or some sort of sweatshirt, and you're going to need about 30% horizontal stretch. You can have both horizontal and vertical, it's not going to make a huge amount of difference. The fabric I'm sewing with today is a unbrushed sweatshirting. So it's a sweatshirting with a loop on the back. It's really similar to a French terry. There's not a huge amount of difference. A French terry just tends to have a touch more stretch in it. Okay, so with this video, I know this is a lot of information at the beginning. I'm going to start off with the pocket version. If you're not sewing the pocket, you can just skip over that to the next section. All the details are in that written construction sequence. And just mix and match this pattern to suit yourself, whatever you prefer to doing. It's actually, I've put it down as an intermediate level sew. It's really more like an advanced beginner sew. It's really just confidence that will get you through this. If you're confident you can do this placket, that's going to be the hardest part of the whole thing, and you'll breeze through it. Whew. Okay, so now I've got all of that out. Let's get started, and we'll start off with the pocket. Here is my pouch pocket piece, and we have 2 side pocket pieces that look like this. They're rectangles with a small notch in the center. So take one of the rectangles and fold it so that it is wrong sides together, and place it right sides together to that pocket side, or one of the pocket sides, and we're going to match the notch in the middle. And now what we're going to do is stitch this pocket side onto the pocket. Now you do need to stretch this piece out. That will help create the curve to make it sit correctly. So what I'm going to do is just start at the beginning here, and when I serge I'm going to sew at 6mm, 1/4 inch, and I'm not cutting any extra fabric off as I go. I'm just going to let that blade trim off any fraying. So what I'm going to do is just start off by sewing a few stitches just to secure that fabric, and that just gives me a little bit of extra room, and it works like another pair of hands. So now I'm going to stretch that piece so the notches match, just flatten out that curve and sew that together. And now I'm going to repeat that on the other side. Now if you want to, you can go to your iron and press that down so the curve is maintained, and if you want to, you can also decoratively stitch, edge stitch or top stitch on that edge. I'm not going to, but you are more than welcome to if you'd like. So go ahead and press that, and we can sew this to the front. Take your front piece and make sure you mark in the drill holes, and here you can see I've marked them in with a pin. I've also marked in with a pin the position of the notches on the bottom hemline. So this view is for a waistband. This pocket has been designed for the waistband view. Take your front and place it right side up and locate the drill holes on the front and make sure you know where they are. So these drill holes are marked as 1 centimetre 3/8 of an inch. So what that means is that's the position from the final placement. In reality, what does that mean? So it means take your pocket and place it right sides down like this. So this is the short end here. So we want the short end closest to those notches. So with that short end, what we're going to do is estimate a position 1 centimetre 3/8 of an inch in from that fold, and you want that to sit like that. So you want this drill hole to be on the edge of your fabric, and hold that in place with a pin, and come to the other side and estimate the 1 centimetre 3/8 of an inch in, put that against the edge of the drill hole and hold that with a pin. Then what we want to do is straighten up this line. We're going to sew a seam here at 1 centimetre. We're going to sew a straight line from drill hole to drill hole, so just make sure that that edge is parallel to the waistband edge, which is here, and we're sewing this seam also at 1 centimetre 3/8 of an inch. So I'm just going to start in and go backwards. So make sure you have a ball needle in here. Really important that it's a ball needle, a stretch needle, so it doesn't pierce or cut your fibres while you're sewing. Also, I've lengthened my stitch length from normal, so I've gone from 2.5 to 3.5. And just go backwards. Don't forget to back tack, and then sew across at 1 centimetre 3/8 of an inch. And we want a nice straight line through to the other side. We want that seam to face towards the middle of the pocket. Don't forget to back tack at the other end. And then take that pocket and turn it over. So we have wrong side to right side, and our pocket is pretty much in its final position. Okay, from here, at the centre bottom of the pocket, there's a notch, and that notches to the centre bottom here, which is going to be our centre front. I'll just pin that to hold it together. And right over here on each edge, you'll also find a notch. So that notch is going to show us where to stitch this pocket into place in a moment. And I'll also mark the notch on the other side, like so. This part is optional, you can do it if you want. What I'm going to do is, making sure that that bottom edge is all matched up, I'm going to top stitch a line of stitching. So mine's going to be about 1/4 of an inch away from that fold. You can sew it at whatever width you like. You could do it with a twin needle, you could do it with a cover stitch machine. This is really just to reinforce the pocket top. Now we're going to finish off the pocket sides. So as you can tell here with this ribbing, my band, the sides of the pocket, that has pushed that pocket out in the curve. So this part is up to you. What we need to do is sew a seam at 1 centimetre. So I'm turning this pocket edge in by 1 centimetre, and when you do that, the edge of the fold should line up with the notch on the bottom here. But clearly, if you sew up in a straight line, your pocket's going to bulge out. So it's up to you now. If you want to do a perfect 1 centimetre and have this as a curve, that's fine. What I'm going to do is just make that work into a straight line. So at the top here, it is definitely tucked under more than 1 centimetre, but what I want is I want this line here to be parallel with this part here. So I am tucking it under more than I should at the top, but at the bottom it is definitely a 1 centimetre 3/8 of an inch seam. So I'm going to stitch this from the right side, and I'm also going to stitch this down at the same width I stitched the top, which was around about 1/4 of an inch, 6 millimetres. If you wanted to, you could also edge stitch that first. It's really just the look you want and what you want to do. I have before done as well, I have matched that up like so and turned it through and sewn it like this as well. So what that means is you line up 1 centimetre away from the edge here and stitch up like that. So you can do that as well if you want to, which will give you a nice fold. So it's really whichever method suits you best, but I find this one's perfectly fine. So I'm turning it under by 1 centimetre 3/8 of an inch. I'm matching it with that bottom notch. And stitching. And then just at the top, I'm just folding it back a little bit more than I normally would, just to make sure it's in a straight line. Okay, so go and give that pocket a press just to make sure everything's sitting nice and flat, and we can move on. Oh, also what is a good idea at this stage is just to maybe tack stitch that lower centre front together, just on the very edge, just to hold that into place. Like so. We're now going to start work on the placket front. So, quick word about plackets. You don't always have to apply fusible interfacing to them. Generally, you only apply fuse if you want to sew in buttons and buttonholes. Now, we have got buttons, but this is a faux placket, a false placket. So I'm not stitching buttonholes into it. Doesn't mean you can't go and hack the pattern and do it anyway, but just this version I suppose is easier. So our buttons are just there for looks. The reason plackets are often not fused is because they can get bulky. So the main thing you need to think of when you are putting fuse here is that you apply a really light fusible interfacing. Certainly it has to be a knit fuse, one that's designed to work with your fabric, but you want a really lightweight one. So now that housekeeping is out of the way, we have 2 sets of fuse. So we've got 4 mirrored pieces, 2 pairs. So apply fuse to one of the pairs. So 1 set of the mirrors, 2 mirrors. We need to make sure it is like this, so they are a mirrored set, because the fuse piece is going to be the outside piece, the piece that you would see if you were wearing the garment. So what we're going to do is we are going to sew these together. So put your pieces that are fused right side up and match them to the pieces that are not fused, so we have right sides together, and match the notch positions. So we want one piece fused, one piece unfused. When you've matched one of the unfused pieces to one of the fused pieces, what you will find is on one side, and it's marked on the pattern, there's 2 notches reasonably evenly spaced. That's the side we want to sew together. The side we don't want to sew together is the side with the notch at the bottom. So match those notches and just overlap them together. Don't forget to do that for the other piece, and then we're going to go to our plain sewer. So when you're at your plain sewer, your straight stitcher, take one of the placket pieces, and just to let you know, the side with the notch at the bottom is the bottom. Okay. So we're going to pin stitch, which some people call understitching, to help create roll to the wrong side. What this means is place one of your placket pieces like this and open it up. And remembering that the side that has the fuse on it is the side that's going to be seen, we want to pin stitch, understitch through all the layers on the side without the fuse. So all that means is we're going to stitch really close to the edge on the unfused side. No need to back tap. Okay, so it's called pin stitch because you sew it the width of a pin. But as I said, some people call it understitching. So don't forget to repeat that for the other side, and then go to your iron and press that placket so that that stitching is all on the underside so you don't see it. Like so. When you've pressed it, it should look like this. And what you will find is there is a small gap here. Now that's completely normal. It's because when we press this under, we've lost 1/8 of an inch, 3 mils. So what you can do if you want, and it is a really good idea, is to take your scissors and just trim this piece here, so the piece without the fuse in it, back by 3 mil, 1/8 of an inch all the way up. You might find it easier when you go to serge on later. If you don't want to do that, that's fine. We can deal with that at the serging stage. If this had been a commercial sewing pattern, I would have had a separate piece for the unfused piece, but because this is a home sewing pattern, it's just another piece of paper to have to cut out and put together. So let's trim that back on both sides and we can move on. We're now going to sew the plackets to the front. The main thing to be aware of is to sew them on the right side. So the best thing to do is place your fabric right side up, so your garment right side up, and place the placket down on top. So what we're looking for is we want the inside curve to be the side without the understitching. We want this side, which is the right, over the top of the left, although at this stage it doesn't really matter. So we want them like this, so the end with the notch closest to the end is down the bottom. So when you've oriented them correctly, what we're going to do is just turn them over and match them. So turn them over so we have right sides together and match them. So what we want to make sure of is at this stage is that we don't sew them on wrong. Alright, so I'm now going to stitch these plackets to the front. I'm going to stitch them on with my plain sewer, and then I'm going to go over that with my serger. So I'll just pin that one into place so I don't get messed up. So as we go down, we have a notch to match in the center. So when you sew, make sure that that is together. The other thing is when we come to the end here, we want the notch here at the end to match the bottom of the cut, and it's really important because we have a 1.5 centimeter, which is 9/16 of an inch hem allowance there, and we want to be able to use that properly. So we want the bottom, we want it to be nice and even. I want the bottom of that notch to match up with that line there. So I'll just hold that into place with a pin. So those are our match points. We're sewing the seam in a 6mm, 1/4 of an inch allowance. And I'm just going to take my time making sure that this matches up. As I said, we'll be going over this in a minute with our serger, if you have one. And then do the same thing on the other side. You might prefer to flip this over to do that. I'm going to do it from the front, which I know is really bad, but I just find it easier to see where it's all going. So turn this over to the back. And now we want to snip small notches. So we're going to snip, make sure you can see this properly, just a little small notch, and we want to do it through the single layer of the front only, not the placket. And we want to cut from the edge of this cutout here towards the stitching on an angle, like so. We want to stop before the stitching, and we don't want to cut through the stitching, so it's very, very small indeed. So we just need to cut a small way on the angle just to help us turn this, and it is through that one layer only. Like so. So we end up just with a little tab, I suppose. Now we're going to serge overlock down the sides of that placket, and you have to be really careful at this stage. When we do this, we want to make sure we don't catch any of the lower front. So we'll start off by doing the left side as if you wear it. So what I'm going to do is just fold all this out of the way, and I'm going to serge overlock tidy that edge we just sewed. And be really careful when you get to the bottom you don't catch any of the front. See how I've got all of that pulled out of the way? Okay, and then we'll do the same thing on the other side. So now it's time to sew across the bottom of the placket. So take this side here and then this side there and pull them through to the back. So what we're going to do is line up the bottom of those plackets, and we want the side on top, so the left side on top. And the tab part that we cut those little notches out of, just make sure that that's unfolded as well. So we've got all that bulk together like so. What we're going to do is just turn it over. So we want to stitch all those layers together between the cutouts. So I'll just show you what that looks. I'll hold that with my fingers. So on the right side of the garment, this is what it looks like now. So we just want to sew across from the bottom of our stitching on one side to the bottom of the stitching on the other. So all I've done is I've just folded the garment up at the bottom of the stitch points, and I'm making sure the placket sides are pushed all the way over. And if you've done it correctly, you should be sewing 6mm in from the raw edge of that little tiny cutout, and we're just going to stitch a seam from the bottom of the stitching to the bottom of the stitching. So it's a very short way. So we're stitching across the bottom of that placket like so. And then come to your overlocker and serge tidy that bottom edge just to tidy all that stray up. And then use whichever method you like to tidy up the ends of your overlocking. I'm going to tuck mine under and stitch it down. You could use fray stop or get a needle and thread it back, whatever method you prefer. Now we're working on the back, so take the back neck facing piece and we're just going to edge tidy the larger edge, the bigger curve. Now place that piece right sides together to the back neck and match the double notches in the centre, and we're going to overlock together the neck edge. So that's the top edge. Now we're going to pin stitch or understitch that facing. So here's the facing here, just turn that up, and we want to stitch on the facing side, pin width away from the edge on top of all of the bulk of that seam. And then go to your iron and press that into place. Now we're going to sew the shoulders, so place the front and the back right sides together and come to the shoulder position. What we're going to do is match that shoulder seam, and at the neckline edge what we're going to do is that fold should be right on the edge of the stitching there, and we're going to wrap the back neck over and hold that down with a pin. So when we stitch through, we're going to stitch through from the shoulder edge through here to the neckline, and we'll do the same thing on the other side. So we're matching that fold there to the edge, wrapping the top over, and we will hold in place with the pin and stitch through to the side. Here is our neckline, and we're going to turn this through like so, and we're going to stitch that into place. So the perfect way to do it is, of course, from the back. It's much easier to see what you're doing. We want to stitch directly through the overlocking line. You can do it from the back or the front. I'm going to do it from the front. I just feel like I can get a better result there. Now let's work on the sleeves. So it doesn't matter which sleeve you are going to work with, I'll talk you through. All of them are the same at the upper edge. So the sleeve I'm sewing right now is the bishop sleeve. So we have sleeves that have a notch at the center top. So that notch at the center top is going to match to the seam of the shoulder here. So what we're doing, right sides together, place the sleeve to that shoulder seam matching the notch, and we're going to sew that seam together from side to side. And don't forget to do that for both sleeves. To sew the side seams and underarm for all of the views, what you're going to do is come to the wrist edge and match the seam there. And we're going to overlock serge those layers together. When we get to the underarm, you want those points to match. You might find it easier if the seams are facing in different direction. And then we're going to sew all the way through to the hemline. Now if you're sewing the curved hem view, the hemline goes off on a bit of an angle. Make sure you maintain that little angle. You want to keep that curve. It will help when you go to stitch your hemline in. And don't forget to repeat that on the other side. So let's sew the cuffs. You'll have two pieces that look like this, and there will be a notch at the center, top and bottom. So take that piece and fold it right sides together, and we're going to sew the seam together through here. And then fold it back on itself so that you have wrong sides together, and just rearrange that and make sure that the seams match and that the notch directly opposite the seams match as well. And don't forget to repeat that for the other cuff. I'm now going to sew the cuff into the bishop sleeve, but the same procedure is for the straight sleeve with the cuff ending. The only difference is the bishop sleeve has more together. So turn your wrist area of your garment inside out and take your cuff and place that inside, and we want to match the seams at the underarm. So match the seam edges, hold it in place with a pin, and directly opposite there'll be a notch, and match that to the notch at the other side. Now if you want to use a fabric for the cuff that doesn't have a huge amount of stretch, it's completely fine. What you'll need to do is run a gathering thread through the bottom area of the bishop sleeve to be able to stretch that into place, because clearly there's a lot of stretch that's needed here. So you can get away with just the self fabric cuff. Just make sure that you do run that gathering sleeve. Gathering stitch, sorry. Oh, it's been a big day. We're just in level 3 lockdown and we're about to go down. So when you have that in the correct position, what we're going to do is overlock that into place, just gently stretching it to fit. Now it'll be a bit more than a gentle stretch with the bishop sleeve version, depending on the fabric you're using. And don't forget to repeat that on the other side. Here we have the waistband piece, and I've folded it right sides together, and I'm going to overlock this short edge. So the edge I've just sewn is going to be the left hand side seam, the fold is going to be the right hand side seam, and there's notches in the centre that are going to match to my centre front and centre back. So our next step is to refold this band so that we have wrong sides together. To attach the waistband, I've turned my garment inside out, the front at the front and the back at the back, and I'm going to place the waistband inside it, matching the seam to the side here. Directly opposite that seam there's a notch, and I'm going to match those notches through to the side seam on the other side, through to the seam on the other side. And then I have notches at the centre front and the centre back, which I'm going to match as well. And if you're sewing the view with the pocket, you're also going to have an extra layer of fabric where that pocket is. So now I'm going to overlock that, serge that together, and I'm going to gently stretch the waistband to fit. And I'm going to serge this together with the waistband on top, and just take your time and make sure you catch all of the layers. Mainly it's 3, but if you do have that pocket view, you'll be serging 4. If you're sewing the hem view, so this is both for the body hem and the sleeve hem, the procedure's the same. I'm going to use a cover stitch machine to stitch my hems in with. You could use a twin needle on your home sewing machine or one of the decorative hem stitches as well. So the hem allowances for both the sleeve and the body is 1.5 centimetres, which is 9/16 of an inch. So what we're going to do is press the hem in to the wrong side, and we're going to stitch that down at that width. Now if you are sewing the curve hem view, what you will find at the hemline, it's got this little tag going out, and that's just to help us shape the hem. For the straight hem view, that will just go straight down, it won't be a problem. So the curve hem does have a curve front and back, and it goes slightly up at the side seams as well. So I'm going to just start from one side of my side seams. So because this is a cover stitcher, I'm going to stitch it from the right side. Okay, so I use my 2 outside needles to do a wide cover stitch there, and I'm just going to go ahead and repeat the process on my sleeves. So let's go on and sew some buttons onto this neckline so we can complete the project. So now it's a matter of sewing our buttons on. So these are just false buttons, and there's no buttonholes to put on the placket. So I'm suggesting 5 buttons. These are quite large. I've put the dimensions in the information sheet. And I'm only going to tell you where the start point is because I've fiddled around quite a lot with these buttons trying to figure out, should I put 6 on, should I put 5 on, how far up should they go? And you know what, it is quite, apart from the main one here, it's quite up to personal taste where you want to put these. I originally thought it'd be quite good having this button go right up to the shoulder line, but that looked good, and then I pulled the first one down here and I had them spaced like this, and I thought that looked quite good too. So all I'm going to say is just choose 5 of them. I think 5 looks good, odd numbers look good, and apart from the first one here, just evenly space them up, whatever looks good on you. So I'm going to get my thread and stitch this through both of these placket layers here, and then these ones will just stitch through the placket on the right hand side as you wear it. So thanks very much for joining me today with the sew along video. If you like what you see, please hit the thumbs up button and also the subscribe button if you haven't already. As always, thank you so much for buying my patterns. I really appreciate it, and I love to see your makes on my Facebook group. So go ahead and jump over there if you haven't joined my group already. The link's in the description below, and I hope to see you again soon.